In Culver City, California, a parking garage is named for Thomas H. Ince, a utilitarian, forgettable monument to one of the most visionary producers in Hollywood history, the man who made Culver City the industry hotspot that it is today. Ince died after having a weekend cruise on William Randolph Hearst's yacht, the Oneida, under possibly mysterious, even suspicious circumstances, possibly perfectly benign circumstances. In the case of Ince's death, layers of conflicting accounts, reports, and documents remind us that some mysteries may never be truly solved. Ince's story is one that intrigues my hunger for a good mystery, a hunger that many humans instinctively share. And for several years now, the possibilities of Ince's death and the glamorous persons connected to the incident have spurred me on a creative and expository exploration of the case. Such connected persons include Luella Parsons, Charlie Chaplin, and William Randolph Hearst and Marion Davies themselves. As Hollywood and mass media continue to inform public opinion on increasingly pervasive levels, Ince's case is a prudent one for us to consider, reminding us to question the nature of truth, fact, and based on a true story. Just how much of that basis is actually fact, things we know for certain, and how much of it is fabrication, or a stretching of the truth even. And to illustrate this, I will discuss a few of the discrepancies regarding conflicting accounts, the probable consumption of alcohol on the part of the deceased, and the possibility that the death was actually caused by a gunshot. First, let's start with the medical opinion in the reports on Ince's death, which contradicts itself frequently throughout the consideration of the case. Official reports and witness evidence, both from the medical staff examining Ince, do not correlate with each other at different times in the discussion. To begin with, the attending physician listed the cause of death as angina pectoris from ptomaine poisoning or acute indigestion impacting the heart. It could be as simple as bad shrimp, and it affected his body because of pre-existing conditions. However, according to an inquiry that was covered by the Chicago Daily Tribune, a nurse who was called as a witness testified that Ince at the time blamed bad alcohol. And while the doctor testified that the deceased had consumed plenty of alcohol, he mentioned that it was of good quality because of who supplied it, of course suggesting that Hearst supplied the alcohol in question. This is a pretty big suggestion because this is at the beginning of the Prohibition period, so saying that someone as famous as Hearst is supplying alcohol to his guests is a pretty big statement. The very existence of these records of this inquiry sets up Marion Davies, mistress of Hearst and one of our primary witnesses, as an unreliable source of information, because she later claims that no doctor was present at Ince's death because of family religious concerns. She's not a completely unreliable source, but we can't take everything she says as gospel. Ince was also promptly cremated, which made further scientific investigation of alcohol or other cause of death in the body and these medical claims impossible to determine. There's suggestions that this could have been engineered. It's possible that the family just was following his wishes. However, because of this cremation, the inquiry relied only on conflicting witness testimony and the medical records, which drew no meaningful conclusions on Ince's cause of death. However, as we have already seen, the ingestion of alcohol prior to Ince's death is a key point greatly disputed in the search for facts of the case. Setting aside medical testimony, Ince's wife, Eleanor, also called Nell, made a conflicting set of claims at different times. Once saying that whiskey may have caused his death, and then again that he was sober at the time of death. Nell was not actually present on the Oneida, but she testified at the inquiry that her husband hadn't had anything to drink on board. The Chicago Daily Tribune does not make it clear where she gets the basis for this claim, but she says it quite vehemently. In her autobiography, though, Marion Davies mentions that Thomas's wife not only asked them to bring him aboard because he had been drinking heavily of late, but also that when the symptoms he displayed were described to Nell, Marion claims that Nell suggested whiskey as something that could have caused them. Davies, of course, flatly denies that any whiskey was supplied on board, but she doesn't say anything about other forms of alcohol in her book. In the response to Nell's assertion about whiskey, Davies says that he would have had to have brought his own flask to have consumed whiskey on board, which suggests that the doctor's statement about bad alcohol, based on who supplied it, isn't perhaps discussing Hearst, or she could be covering up for her lover. It's also possible that other alcohol was consumed, because when I was on tour at Hearst Castle, the tour guide explains that while Hearst is very strict about prohibition where hard liquor is concerned, he actually keeps beer in his kitchen to serve to his guests and for their consumption during their stay at the manor. It's a potential that he had the same policy for his yacht, but I've been unable to find any specific mention of this. So there could have been alcohol on board the yacht, even if whiskey was not served. Another rumor, although no hard evidence has ever turned up proof, that has been long-standing in Hollywood history is that Ince was actually shot to death and that his stomach and indigestion had nothing to do with it, that these were an elaborate cover-up developed by Hearst, which is supposedly cemented by the prompt cremation of the body. The rumor was born by a single headline in the New York Daily News, which called the death a shooting. No other newspapers picked up on this decision by the New York Daily News, and no other mention is made of it except to say that it's ludicrous, or innuendos by people who weren't actually present. Davies admits to having read the article in her book, but she dismisses the idea of Ince having been shot as an unfathomable impossibility, and that neither means or motive are present in the case. It's difficult to say what the motive might have been. One of the typical things is that he was shot in place of someone else, that he was mistaken for Charlie Chaplin or another person on board, where there would have been more of a motive. There's also a consideration that the gun was fired completely on accident. As far as the means, while Davies flatly denies that any weapons were ever on board the ship, the editor of her biography actually notes that there is a long-standing rumor that Hearst had a pistol on the ship for shooting seagulls. This is a rumor that was dramatized in the Bogdanovich film The Cat's Meow to create an elaborate film based on a popular conspiracy theory of Ince's death, in which he is, in fact, mistaken for the great Charlie Chaplin. So with every statement of fact in the case, Thomas Ince's death, there is at least one credible or equally incredible contradictory voice, and many, many voices that are speaking out for the most sensational version that they can find. Part of the lure in this tale is that of an unsolvable mystery, of course, a puzzle, a challenge that no one can meet, so that everyone has to have their turn at trying to fit the pieces together, and many people in the most sensational way they can imagine it. Ince's death is a perfect reminder to us that some cases, even those involving the rich and famous, go too cold to ever really be solved satisfactorily. The Thomas H. Ince parking garage may be a solitary and mundane monument to Ince in Culver City, but the legend of the mystery of his death is one of the best true stories that Hollywood has ever created.